Wow. 5 minutes. They're just giving 5 minutes. I just have 10 slides. I practice it. 5 minutes. Go on. It's very strict, you know. Good. Okay, this is going to be a very full run. Let's see. We'll start in just about 2 or 3 minutes. Feel free to grab some more food and sit down. We'll give you another couple of minutes to munch and chew and drink. Then we'll start. They'll fit small restaurant. Almost there. We're trying to set up also a small restaurant. It's good. So you're from you have a new government. So that is on the other side over here. Also, because you know, having the issue of in the main other side. Of course, you gotta bring food like that.
Yeah, and well, we just couldn't get it from there either.
My favorite is jointed with the bird spread. Or sandwich. Yeah,
I was like, I saw you watch.
I know this, I was looking for you.
Yeah, she emailed
Which I told her, go to see her how she's handling it.
And this is with that level of professionalism.
Wow, not that much.
No, it is.
More scribbles than anything else. I'm always nervous. It's like going to school for an exam. I think I'm going to forget everything.
Yes, I have the same kind of.
Okay. Feels good to know that others are like that.
Can you please keep your voices up too, if you don't mind?
Yes.
Since there's no mics.
Hold on.
No,
There are
I don't
no
like.
mics.
There's no mic. I don't think this is.
You mean for the screening or for people here?
No, I mean for you guys to be heard, you have to keep your voices
In
up.
this room?
In this room,
Ah,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
yes,
and for
okay.
me to hear you because I'm interpreting, because I'm Spanish speakers, yeah.
Okay.
I might have to come and crouch near you if I can't hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why they have such a small room.
I don't understand too. What's not the Paris Agreement? People from Paris and Source, by the way. Maybe you would like to talk.
There's organized
An event, a training for Indigenous Peoples leaders.
Oh, yeah.
Thursday at lunchtime. It's on the Paris Agreement and a little bit more on forest, but just to ensure that the Indigenous people understand what is in the Paris Agreement, what are the INDCs, what are the operational entities, so they can We can structure the slides accordingly. That's Thursday at 1 p.m.
Thursday at 1. I have colleagues here all
Or
week.
you can share.
Yeah.
1 p.m. In the, not here at the Secretariat, in the conference room number 7 in the main building, or in the premises, in the main UN premises. And I thought a lot to have there because they wanted us to use this room or other room.
From our desk.
We have interpretation in French, English, Spanish.
Okay.
And I said, makes no sense. And I thought that when people would see our situation, I got a So,
You're organizing this?
yes, I will be the main presenter somehow. And then it will be, it's a training and dialogue. So there will be like part of the training.
Over here and then not even you know, and there's just
That
way more than
supposed to be effective in their
two
struggle.
in there.
They need to know what to do.
Yeah, sure.
So I want to decodify a Paris Convention and to give them a glimpse of how it works at country level. The global arena,
Well, this is, you want to save it
there
or?
will be discussion and debate, but it's important that I understand what governments are meant to do
Yeah.
and how to do it. So I want to offer the basic building elements and then to open a dialogue so people can share their experiences, their concerns. So it's a training and dialogue.
Okay.
The leaflet, I
Yeah.
finalize it.
Okay.
Okay.
So I had the same thing. They were confining me here, and easily when you have 20 or 30 people interested,
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense. So I thought everybody was thinking I was crazy. And this event we are now is more interesting, or let's say more popular than that one started, which is more of a trend. Should have been the opposite. Sorry?
There's the lobby.
Yeah. Nothing free to stay here, no problem. I think we should move ourselves back so more people come.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please come in and have lunch. I think several of us will have to stand, but I hope that's okay. Find any place to stand against the wall or in the middle. We'll begin, but be sure to get lunch and just find a place if you can to stand. So welcome, everyone. If you need translation, we have translation into Spanish. Who can say that? America, would you say that in Spanish? Let people know. A little louder, can't hear you. Okay, so good afternoon. Sorry, apologies that this room is smaller than we wanted. We're delighted that you're all here. Please do come in and feel free to get up and get things to eat during the course of this event. We have a very exciting program here and we're so delighted that you can be here. We apologize for the inconvenience that some of you will have to stand, but we intend to make it worth your while. My name is Charles McNeil. I'm representing UNDP here, and I want to welcome all of you in the room today here at UN headquarters in New York, but I also want to welcome all of those people participating around the world watching on the webcast. We don't know how many people there are. There might be a lot of people out there all over the world, and we invite you, to join us in this program. So, and please do keep coming in. If there's any blocking of the doorway, please you know, if you can't stand out of the way and come in, you can even come and stand here behind. Feel free. This is your home. Feel comfortable. Don't be polite. Make sure you get what you need. Over the past few years, there's been a really dramatic and unprecedented awakening worldwide about the importance of land rights to the achievement of many social and environmental goals and goods. It seems like every few months, a new study reveals that more multidimensional benefits to the acquiring of land rights by indigenous peoples and local communities, and the cost to those people and to the global community when such rights are denied. It's an exciting time for those of you and those of us working in this area. This issue and this side event are intimately related to the theme of this year's UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. That theme is conflict, peace, and resolution. And I say that because one analysis of 71 cases of civil conflicts and war across the world found that more than 2/3 of these conflicts were driven by contested claims around land. It is becoming increasingly clear that addressing local land rights and land security will be a crucial determinant of success for the new global frameworks on climate change and sustainable development. And this is what we'll be talking about today. So please come in, please come on in. You can come up and stand in the front if you like, and make sure, just push your way to the food. There's lots of food there. Get what you need. The scope of this challenge is substantial. Research suggests that indigenous peoples and local communities lack legal rights to almost 3/4 of their traditional lands. So clearly, there's a lot of work to be done. But it is very encouraging to see the international community increasingly acknowledging and engaging with this issue. There's even now a global campaign calling to speed up progress in this area, and we'll hear a little bit about that in a few minutes. I, for one, could not have anticipated this fast-growing understanding even a few years ago. Today, we have a talented and experienced panel to help us dive more deeply into the facts and trends around indigenous peoples, land rights, climate change, and sustainable development. Although I will introduce each panelist just before they speak, I wanted to give you a brief overview of the program so you know what's coming. Come on in, step forward, make yourself comfortable. There's a little room. You can even stand behind. Feel free to stand behind here. There's room over here. Come on up to the front. Roberto Guerrero, come on in. Guerrero.
He might have read somewhere.
Come on in and make yourself as comfortable as possible. So our first speaker will be Tashka Yawanawa, who will talk about how, over the last 10 years since the demarcation of his people's land, through concerted collaboration with government, NGOs, and business partners, they have been able to secure their rights, avoid conflict, and promote resolution by consultation. An important element of this work over the last 4 years has been the development of a Yawanawa life plan that was generated by the full participation of the community. And even if you're outside and don't have a seat, do come in to grab some food. Maybe, Marika, tell people out there there's food, and just kind of fight your way in. The second speaker, Galina Angarova, will tell us about the work of the Indigenous Peoples Major Group and their advocacy for the inclusion of clear indicators on Indigenous peoples and collective land rights into the Sustainable Development Goals Monitoring Framework. We all know that what gets measured is what gets managed, so this is clearly an important initiative. Next, we'll hear from Alain Frechette of the Rights and Resources Initiative, who will speak about the role of land rights in achieving the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement, the potential opportunity that countries' nationally determined contributions could provide to ensure land rights are addressed in countries' efforts to tackle climate change. Josep Garí of the UN REDD program will reflect on the importance of land rights in achieving REDD+ results as well as sharing some examples of how the RED Plus process is helping to advance Indigenous and land rights in the UN RED partner countries around the world. And I will conclude the panel portion, part of our program, by briefly describing some new insights about the role of land rights in successful forest management from a book on community forest management about to be published by the Equator Initiative. Then we will engage with you, the audience here and the audience around the world, to hear your views, experience, and questions. So now we're about to begin, and I know there's still more people out there than can fit in this room. What can we do about this? Maybe just continue to make room for people to come in and grab something to eat. If you're standing kind of near the table, just let people come in and grab a plate, and hopefully you can hear out there. Delphin, can you hear us out there? Can you hear us all right?
People can see the front.
Oh, now brilliant. This is genius. Oh, this is fantastic. This is a resourceful panel. I told you they were experienced and smart. So people, claim your space. Feel free to come and sit in front here if that's comfortable. Okay, now we're talking. Great. Okay. Now, Tashka. Many of you know Tashka. He's a chief of the Yawanawa people of the Brazilian Amazon. He's an Equator Prize winning community, and Tashka grew up well aware of the issues of identity and disempowerment confronting Indigenous peoples today. As a young boy, he witnessed the virtual enslavement of his people under the rubber barons and experienced the near annihilation of his culture. In the 1980s, he became involved in the emerging local indigenous movement and has actively participated in the campaign for the demarcation of indigenous territories. Tashka was directly involved in the creation of the Indigenous Lawyers Association and co-founded the Indigenous and Non-Indigenous Youth Alliance, through which he shares the experiences and knowledge of the Yawanawa with youth around the world and works with projects that guarantee the preservation of indigenous culture. In 2001, after years of studying and advocating abroad, Tashka returned to Brazil to use the knowledge gained from his experiences to help his people transform their future. So let's welcome Tashka, and feel free, there's room, look at all this room sitting here. So anybody who wants to come and sit, Delphin, there's room for you right here on the front if you want. Okay, okay, good. Okay, so please, make yourself as comfortable as you can.
Maybe you can.
Dr. Tashka.
Cheers.
Oh yeah, can you move the chairs?
Oh, yeah, all the chairs.
Okay, I'm going to stand because in my community I always talk stand. I feel more comfortable than sitting. Yeah. Mashallah kanimo. My name is Tashka, I would say, and I'm the chief of the Yawanawa people. The Yawanawa people live in the state of Acre and the Yawanawa territory. The Yawanawa people was contacted at 60, and the first contacts happened with patrons, Robert Peppers, and in 17 was the missionaries. And in 1983, we were started to treat like a slave by the patrons and the missionaries. We expel all them, and we demarcate our own territory. The Brazilian government was not so much work to do because we already started that kind of revolutionary thing. And that example, or other people use it to demarcate also the land and state of Acre. And as indigenous people, we always work to protect our environment, and we are looking for the ways how we use it, the resource we have in the community, without cause damage or destroy the environment where we live. In 2002, we have this big reflection. How was the Yawanawa in the past? What kind of food we eat? What kind of dress we have? What kind of paint we use? What kind of pray we have? And how was the Yawanawa in that moment? And how was the Yawanawa we look in the future? But what we saw in the time, that time, the Yawanawa were very weak people. The cultural and spiritual manifestation was almost disappeared. And the Yawanawa territory was so small. And that time was about just 100,000 hectares. And that means a lot of sacred places like cemeteries, like a place where our people used to hunt and fish was outside our territory. And we say, we're not going to have a future if our land is so small, because we're going to lose this sacred cemetery, place where our people use from immemorial time to hunt and fish. And in this time, the government state activists opened this big highway they call BR-364. The BR-364 cuts the whole state of Acre, and they link it with transoceanic, which goes straight to Peru, to the Pacific. And we say, this is the time. You need to organize to revise our land. And also, we say, we're not going to have future if our people not proud to be Yawanawa. That's need to be inside that. And we ask each of the elders, we lost everything? We say, no, everything is sleeping outside. And they told them, let's wake up. And for the first time, we organized what we call the Yawanawa Festival. It was a week of dancing, healing, arts, cultural and spiritual manifestation. To me, was very, I was in shock, because at that time I was 25 years and I never saw my people like that. And actually, we was filming in the nightly show, and the people were not believing it was like that. And my father was very happy at the time. He said, I'm very happy to die now, because I know that my people in this 21st century never going back again. Now my people have a future. And 14 years later today, the Yawanawa organized every year 2 events. One event we call Mariri Yawanawa, and another event we call Festival Yawanawa, where the Yawanawa people, they dedicate a week to celebrate the life, to celebrate the song, to celebrate the prayers and the ceremonies. And 14 years later, now we have the double land. Now we have 200,000 hectares of the land. And today, the Yawanawa feel proud to be Yawanawa. And again, 5 years ago, we sit again and say, let's evaluate what we did in these times, and let's do the same evaluation again. And we start organize the workshop in the communities. The workshop was to think how the Yawanawa will manage the territory, how the Yawanawa will interact with traditional world and the new world, how we going to work in the Western knowledge and our traditional knowledge, and also how we're going to protect our land. And we work in we call the Yawanawa Life Plan. The Yawanawa Life Plan will listen to the elders, to the women, to the shamans, to participate in that vision. Why we include everybody? Because the women have so much to help in the community. Actually, I didn't mention that. Meanwhile, we wasn't working that. The Yawanawa broke the taboo. We have the first Yawanawa woman shaman, because this is very hard work. You to be a shaman, you need to spend that whole year isolated in the jungle, just to drink ayahuasca and do tobacco. And that's the man was scared, but these two young women say, they come to the shaman and say, we want to become the first woman shaman. And all men was complaining about it. They said, the woman cannot do that. But the shaman said, it's not about gender, it's about spirit. They want it, they can do it. And they prove for the whole man, the woman have a shaman. But the first time we have 2 women shaman in the Yawanawa community. Sometimes we need broken taboos to strengthen our future. when we organize the Yawanawa Life Plan, we listen everybody, like the shaman, because shaman have a division. And the woman has so much to do. The young people think about the future. We organize a workshop about the kids. And it was very funny because into that workshop, I have two kids from Canada, for my friend that visited me. And I say, okay, guys, you are welcome to enjoy with the Yawanawas children here at the workshop. And the Yawanawa say, can you draw your future in 5 years? And the Yawanawa kids draw a lake, a jungle, people play in the river, everything. And I get the Canadian guys, they draw McDonald's, they draw highway. I say, oh my God, it's a contrast. And I say, we don't want this in our community. We want more lakes, more forests, more things. And after 5 years, we finished the Yawanawa Life Plan. And what we did, sometimes indigenous peoples are beyond of government. And we present to our government. We say, look, that's what we have. And they say, they don't have a platform to support our project. And because we say, we can apply for that we call the payment for environment service. Unfortunately, in my country today, we don't have a federal laws that we can work about red, about payment for environmental service or carbon, anything. And they say, unfortunately, we cannot do that. I think the governments, my message is the government, they need support indigenous people for that kind of initiative because we don't want you guys come to do for us because we are doing by ourselves. We are doing your jobs. You just need support for what we're doing. And the Yawanawa Life Fund basically is a tree with a lot of hands. We talk about education, about the health, about protecting our environment, about economic project, and how we are now going. Like for today, we have this partnership with this company called Avida Corporation. I think that some people you know, it's North American company. We have 23 years working with them. We sell this anato, the red color we paint our face in the body. Every time the Yawanawa people want paint their face in the body, like my friends have face. We want to show happiness. We want to show health. And that's me. We are linked with the spirit of the forest. We are linked with the spirit of nature. And I better use this red color and do and make the people's beautiful. And we are right now we are looking for another. We have this acai berry. I think some of you know about acai. And what we want, we are start collecting native acai for our land because our land we have a lot of acai. We have to plant the acai, and what we have to do, we call add ethnic value to the product. Example is Avida, and example is our acai. We're going to work on that. Like many countries, they have the nut urucum, but just Yawanawa produce the way what we do in organic way, and they link it with the Yawanawa culture that the Yawanawa use it for immemorial time. That's give the value to the urucum. The same thing we are doing with acai. Like in my country, they have this company they call Amazon, Sambazon. They buy for other people. But what are we going to do? Acai Yawanawa, they come from a land produced by native people and produced by no chemical usage, and they going to help to protect 400,000 acres. And that's kind of the vision what we have right now. And that I think the big fight today is demarcate the indigenous territory, because the indigenous territory means future. you cannot disconnect the indigenous people from the land. They use that for immemorial times. And after that, and how we're going to use what we have in sustainable way. Because it's very easy for my people, just logging. It's very fast activity, but we're not going to do that because we don't see a big symbol of the dollar in the trees. We see in the trees the symbol of the peace and harmony. Wherever you come from, when you go to the jungle, you feel peace, you feel harmony, because everybody comes from the nature. I have more minutes?
You have time. Just wrap up 1 minute.
Thank you very much. And I'm gonna thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tashka. I want to propose an adjustment of the room just for a moment. Could each of you move your chair forward 1 foot? We want to make room for those people back there. James and Pamela, could you move your chair forward 1 foot?
Already on the wall.
We want to create some space back there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tashka. We're going to have a chance for a discussion. That's great. You want to jam up as close as you can.
Guys, I'm going to show you very fast the picture I didn't show. This is the Yawanawa people.
Put those
This
chairs
is the
in
picture of the Yawanawa, my people. Very fast.
America, can you help them move the chairs forward?
Yeah. This is the Yawanawa. That was I was talking about it, about my people.
Great.
The fish, açaí, breakfast, urucum, river. We don't have a road, we have a
Sit
river.
down. I think you're blocking it.
Our environment, house, organized workshops, women's club, organized workshops, lesson.
Oh, that's mine.
Okay.
Sorry. Great, thanks. Whoever's, maybe to put those lights back on. Can you try moving the chairs a little bit further? This one on the right, just move forward, no, forward, the chairs forward, and the back row just a little bit.
Eu vou ficar do seu lado aqui mesmo. You side, you become my headdress.
Oh, okay, sure. If you could, yeah, move those. That's great. So it gives some more room. And maybe turn the lights back on. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Tashka. It's my great honor to introduce Galina, who is a representative of the Buryat Peoples, a Russian indigenous group. She is also a policy advisor at Tebteba and a global organizing partner for the Indigenous Peoples major group at the UN. Previously, Galina has worked in various roles addressing climate change and advocating for the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. This included leading a highly effective international and local grassroots efforts to block pipeline construction in the Altai region of Siberia, which threaten indigenous sacred sites, as well as to close a toxic paper mill on the Lake Baikal in Siberia, and to stop plans to construct a hydro dam that would flood the ancestral lands of the indigenous Yawanawa peoples in Western Siberia. Galina currently serves on the board of International Funders for Indigenous Peoples, so it's great to have a warrior like Galina here speaking with us. Welcome, Galina.
Thank you. I'm so glad to see a lot of my friends here as well. So great to see a lot of faces. And it's a great honor to be here, and thank you for inviting to speak. And as you mentioned, I've been working for the past 3 years as the focal point for Indigenous peoples at the post-2015 development agenda, which is now called Agenda 2030. And I have been asked to make a presentation about land rights and Indigenous peoples in Agenda 2030 through the lens of the SDGs and indicator development.
Can you hear okay, Roberto?
Can you
I know
hear
we
me?
have a lot of white noise, so you'll have to scream at Roberto
Oh my
over there.
Okay. So the quick overview of what I'm going to talk about. So what is the Indigenous Peoples Major Group? Maybe a lot of people are not familiar.
Delphine, just turn the lights off.
Secondly, land rights of Indigenous peoples. Just briefly talk about how important they are. third, development of the SDG indicators and what we're expecting to do in the future. So, so the Indigenous Peoples Major Group is one of the 9 major groups that are officially represented to the United Nations and have the ability to make interventions on behalf of Indigenous peoples during deliberations among member states. So we were the ones, actually my partner in crime, Roberto Barreros, who is the second global organizing partner from the Indian Treaty, International Indian Treaty Council, which is here. Can you raise your hand? We've been working together to negotiate with governments and promote the language on Indigenous peoples to be included in the final outcome document for the post-2015 development agenda. So our active engagement at the United Nations resulted in 6 direct references to Indigenous peoples, and 2 of them are here. Target 2.3, I'm not going to read the whole thing, right, to save time. And target 4.5 on education. The first one is on food, and the target 4.5 is on education. Additionally, we have direct references to Indigenous peoples in paragraphs 23, 25, 51, and 79. You can actually download the document on the Sustainable Development Platform and look at it. Make sure the references are there. Yes. So the SDGs will shape our future for the next 15 years. It's extremely important. Of course, the land rights are extremely important for Indigenous peoples because the land and territory, the lands, territories, and resources, without them, we are basically destined to extinction. We cannot imagine the lives of Indigenous peoples without their lands and access to their resources. So as a result, I'm going to be specifically talking about land indicators now. So you can see that significant gains of land rights in target 1.4, which addresses equal rights to ownership and control over land, and target 2.3, which specifically addresses secure and equal access to land for Indigenous peoples. However, there are like major disadvantages. Number 1, 2.3 captures land rights through the lens of agricultural productivity, which means that land security is and access is limited to agricultural land. And as we know, Indigenous territories and lands are not limited to agricultural lands. We have steppes, mountains, we have forests. Forests are extremely important for Indigenous people. I know that in my village, 95% of the food comes from the forest, comes from the steppes. I know for people in the Arctic, 100% of their food comes from nature, from the wilderness. So how do we account for that? Number 2, free, prior, and informed consent was not included in the final text of the outcome document. I remember Roberto and I have been fighting to include the language of free, prior, and informed consent in the final document. However, in the last day when the document was adopted, the reference was deleted. The number 3, Agenda 2030 does not affirm the collective rights of Indigenous people to their lands, territories, and resources. And as you know, collective rights is basically the core of our existence. We have to have the collective rights to land, territories, and resources. So since then, we have been really working hard because right now is the phase when we're working on development of indicators for each of the targets. And we have been in a coalition with the Land Coalition, actually Rights and Resources Institute as part of that coalition, along with Oxfam, Namati, and a number of other organizations. And we have been proposing the following indicators, really important. Percentage of women, men, Indigenous peoples, and local communities with secure rights to land, property, and natural resources, measured by A, percentage with legally documented or recognized evidence of tenure, and B, percentage of people who perceive their rights are recognized and protected. As you can see, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So as you can see in this language, this indicator includes land tenure, it includes indigenous peoples, it includes all types of land tenure, it also includes desegregation by gender, right? And also it not only includes the recognition and evidence, but also perception that the rights of indigenous peoples are recognized. Perception, recognition and perception are two different people, two different things. You basically have to make sure, you have to go down on the ground and ask people, do you think that your rights to the land are being protected, are being guaranteed? And that's how you measure that indicator on the ground. Okay, so some of my colleagues attended the second meeting of the International Interagency Expert Group on SDG indicators. And that's the agency that was created to develop the set of global indicators. So they met in October 2015, and these are the two indicators that have been adopted. We proposed the previous language for different targets, number 1, number 2, and number 5, on poverty, on food, and on women. Unfortunately, we only got these two after that meeting. And you will see that indigenous peoples are nowhere anywhere mentioned in these two indicators. One of them, basically, we got secure land rights, we have the segregation by sex, right bearers, and type of land tenure. We also have a good indicator on laws. However, indigenous peoples are absent. What happened between October 2015 and March 2016? Somehow, this indicator on land got back on the table during the negotiations among the governments. And we got all the language. Indigenous peoples are absent here. In March, 47th session of the UN Statistical Commission, indicators with specific references to indigenous peoples appeared in the document. Under goals 2, indicator 232, indicator 4.5.1, and we have them now in the document, which is a great achievement. Additionally, when I was in Mexico for the interagency work group meeting, the third one, I had a conversation with my colleagues from FAO, and they ensured that indigenous peoples are included in the metadata collection for 5A1. Also a great achievement. You can download that document using this link. So very quickly, what are we expecting in the next few months? In September, that expert group will present the final set of indicators for the adoption during the UN General Assembly. We have less than 5 months to continue advocating to include indigenous peoples in land indicators. We have to maintain, lobby, and advocate for the 2 direct references in the indicators that I have shown previously. We have to continue to exercise pressure on the development of metadata. And finally, we need to start cooperating with the regional bodies and national governments to develop regional and national indicators. And this is where your role, because you come from your countries, and you need to work with your governments to include indigenous peoples indicators in your national plans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Galina. What an important body of work that is. Thanks to Roberto and for many of you for driving this agenda at the global level. So we're hearing the local story from Tashka, now the global level, and now we're going to hear another cut at this story from Alain Frechette, who is the Senior Policy Advisor with the Rights and Resources Initiative, with years of experience in natural resource management, biodiversity conservation, and climate change. Alan joined the Rights and Resources Initiative in 2015, where he leads the Rights and Climate theme and provides technical guidance and support for the development of RI's performance management system, the International Land and Forest Facility, and the Strategic Analysis and Global Engagement Unit. Thank you, Alan. coming from all the way from Montreal
Yes.
to be here. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for this nice presentation and nice setting. I'd like to start my presentation by making basically 3 points, which I'll revisit and discuss in further detail. First, we need to acknowledge the critical role of forests in global struggle to combat climate change. In effect, the future of humanity is linked to the maintenance of the world's forests. Then we need to ask ourselves the very question of who will save the world's forests if not the people who depend on, live in, and have protected the forests that we now wish to save. And lastly, we must recognize that the Paris Agreement and the national plans that were submitted to curb greenhouse gas emissions do not, or noticeably do not, address tenure or indigenous land rights. But we must view this as a temporary setback and not because it provides the tools and the means to address, to overcome this challenge. So first, forests offer the only viable means of balancing global carbon budget until source emissions are drastically reduced. However, this is likely to become costlier and more challenging as time goes on, due in part to increasing and competing demands on ecosystem services and other resources, and then the very challenge of maintaining and sustainably managing a growing forest domain. Essentially, governments cannot do this alone. In a world under pressure, science tells us that we need to look towards strengthening resilience and building local adaptive capacities. This requires us to engage in locally adapted solutions that build on local knowledge, local capacities, and local stewardship. In effect, what we're asking, what we need, is what Wendell Berry and Aldo Leopold have said, or called, or referred to as affection for land, people, and place. This brings us to my second point. To save the world's forests, we need to start recognizing the people that live in and have for generations protected the forests that we now wish to protect. Indigenous peoples and local communities have largely been responsible for the existence of remaining forests that we wish to secure, and securing their rights is the first step in securing our common future. Research shows that securing land rights for Indigenous and local communities drastically reduces deforestation and forest carbon emissions, and tends to significantly improve outcomes in terms of poverty reduction, enhanced livelihoods, and improved biodiversity outcomes. Arguably, securing rights is the only strategy that is consistent with Article 4.1 of the Paris Agreement, which calls on all parties to pursue actions on the basis of equity and the context of sustainable development and efforts to eradicate poverty. So where does this lead us in terms of the Paris Agreement and the INDCs? In preparation for Paris, national governments were asked to submit intended nationally determined contributions outlining their plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. At RI, we conducted analysis of these submissions. In all, 188 countries submitted these INDCs, and just 21 countries, covering no more than 13% of the global forest area, made clear commitments to address community land rights. And only one, Cambodia, made measurable commitments to expand community rights. Collectively, this tells us the international community is missing a major opportunity to commit to a proven climate change solution. Of concern is the fact that many of the largest forested countries with the highest rates of deforestation, namely Brazil, Indonesia, and DRC, did not include significant commitments to expand tenure rights in natural resource management in their INDCs, despite ongoing local efforts. Why is this mission important? Because INDCs are designed to ensure transparency and accountability of all parties. To be encouraged, tenure reforms need to be referenced in the INDCs so that they too, like carbon emissions, can be monitored, reported, and verified, recognized by the international community, and supported by dedicated funding streams. So where this all leave us? Paris Agreement and INDCs have built-in mechanisms to continuously strengthen commitments with periodic obligations to do so every 5 years. We must recognize that setting concrete goals to protect the rights of indigenous and local communities is essential if the global community wishes to progress on climate mitigation action. To this end, countries should be encouraged to include specific, measurable, and robust tenure targets in their INDCs as part, coming up to 2020, when the first revision of the INDCs comes up. We need bilateral and strong bilateral, multilateral financing mechanism to increase and expand dedicated financial and technical support for tenure reform. And we need the leading platforms that support land and forest-based mitigation, namely all the multilateral and bilateral initiatives, to recognize tenure rights in their guidelines and safeguards as necessary prerequisites for effective, equitable, and accountable REDD+ implementation. Moving from the recognition that forests are critical to our survival, we must also recognize that the survival of forest depends on those who are at the forefront of the global struggle to protect them. We have tools at our disposals, and we must recognize that support the transformation that are now incumbent upon all of us if we want to achieve the ambitious goal of limiting global temperature rise by 1.5 degrees. This brings us to a joint initiative which Charles mentioned and Galina also mentioned, which is a joint initiative spearheaded by the International Land Coalition, Oxfam NRI. It sets global challenge of doubling the amount of land that is legally recognized and protected by 2020. And it's called the Global Call to Action. We are all part of this global call to action. All of these actions are ongoing now, are essential to pushing this ahead. So I call on all of you to continue this struggle, and together we might achieve the success.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Incredibly important is that these nationally determined commitments will guide what countries do. And to the extent land rights issues are in there, that is the degree to which these issues will be taken into account. Thank you so much for your analysis and for your comments. Now, the last speaker is Josep Garí of the UN REDD program. He'll reflect on the importance of land rights in achieving REDD+ results. He's a senior policy advisor at UNDP with a focus on advancing social inclusion in national REDD+ policies, and with attention on the rights of indigenous peoples, the development priorities of forest communities, and gender equality. Since 2000, Joseph has served at the World Bank, the FAO, the Inter-American Development Bank, and UNDP with roles in projects scanning 35 countries across Africa and Latin America and Southeast Asia. Joseph is deeply committed to these issues we're talking about. It's my honor to invite Joseph to speak now.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you very much, everybody, for the interest. I would like to talk particularly about the forest. We all know that without the forest, there is no sustainable development. We know that the forest and actually actions to address deforestation and forest degradation is going to be very difficult to achieve, if not impossible, the climate goals. We all know that the forests are very important in three layers. First of all, because they are providing livelihoods and the identity of hundreds of communities across the world. And this is what I refer to the primary custodians of the forest, those who live there, and therefore they should be considered as the primary forces to conserve the forest. Secondly, the forests provide tremendous environmental services for nations. We all know, starting from water, but biodiversity, and there is a long list that we could draw. But most importantly, in the last decades, everybody knows that the forests provide a crucial global environmental service, which is to mitigate climate change. So we have different roles of forests that go from the community level to the national level and to the global level. The efforts of the international community around the forest in the last decades, we need to recognize that they have failed. Overall, deforestation has been going rampant in the last 30, 40, 50 years. In view of that, the international community conceived the concept, the provisions around REDD+, which is basically looking at how governments and different stakeholders can get together to reduce deforestation and forest degradation and get some compensation and some investment to do that, because there is a recognition of the value of those forests. Here is where it comes the REDD+ mechanism. The REDD+ mechanism, which is embedded in the Paris Declaration, clearly under Article 5, which is indirectly referenced throughout the Sustainable Development Goals of all these different environmental and social values of forests, and which is meant to be one of the crucial components of the INDCs that my colleague Helen just mentioned that countries are going to commit. When countries decide to inscribe forests in their national determined contributions, basically what they are signaling is that forests are both important at the national level and for the international community. What is the challenge ahead? I think we all recognize, and the international community recognizes, that forests are crucial. What needs to change is the way that forests are perceived and addressed. And the key entry point, and this is what through the REDD mechanism we are trying to work increasingly, is to ensure that governments design policies and measures to address deforestation and to inscribe sustainable forest management in their development process. This is easy to say, this is more complicated to do, of course. How to design this kind of policies? These kind of policies, they need first a proper understanding of what are the drivers of deforestation. Secondly, to craft multi-stakeholder dialogues and alliances to work together for a common objective. This is a very important task for countries, to get governments, indigenous peoples, and the private sector in some cases working together hand by hand. This is a big different change that countries will have to face. We cannot conserve the forest in parallel streams. There needs to be national level alliances. And third point, countries need to tackle important reforms. And here is where comes the question of rights. The reforms that countries need to deal to conserve the forest, we all know, are highly related to tenure, are highly related to land rights, are highly related to territorial management. Because we all know that forests, to contribute to climate in a positive way, the only way is through adequate and sustainable management of forests and lands and the different uses. And this means that there has to be alliances among different stakeholders at the country level to succeed to do that. The countries that get serious about the forest, and therefore the countries that are likely to get payments through the Convention on Climate Change, are the countries that will necessarily inscribe those rights. Because we know that without adequate tenure discussions, it's not possible for countries to provide results in terms of forest conservation. And here I would like to signal 3 countries that are among the pioneers in the REDD mechanism, that are among the pioneers that wants to work on the nexus between forest and climate, and how rights and tenure is critically inscribed in their policies and measures for REDD. First, I would like to mention the Democratic Republic of Congo. Democratic Republic of Congo has been increasingly committed at the international level to conserve forests and to inscribe forests in their national development. The process has been long, has taken several years, and I want to highlight that because when we want to inscribe rights and tenure and indigenous peoples' territorial rights in national policy, it takes years of policy dialogues and building trust and building alliance, precisely what has lacked in the previous decades. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the crucial milestone of the country has been to design a national strategy to reduce deforestation, which inscribe land tenure and land use planning and policy as 2 of the 7 strategic pillars. And that has taken a lot of time to inscribe that. They have inscribed that. That has been adopted by the Council of Ministers a few years ago. The process has gone on as through the dialogue, in view of the potential of international finance for conserving the forests, the result has been the Ministry of Finance themselves inscribing 5 REDD+ and forest indicators out of 27 reform indicators in the country. As you can see, it's a stepwise process of changing the way a country plans its own development process. And what is more important, and it's not that easy, is to have the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Planning engage in forest conservation. And that's the critical element, where also the questions of tenure and indigenous people's rights are played. We cannot circumscribe these questions to environmental ministries, to agencies dealing with forests, to agencies dealing with protected areas. We need to get transversal because there's a level of complexity and connections that if those dots don't connect, it's impossible to do changes and reforms that will yield the results in terms of forest conservation and community rights. Ministry of Finance committed with the international community to address land use planning and land tenure as part of the reforms. This is the process, the way the process is linked. Very recently, the Democratic Republic of Congo signed with the international community, with several donors, a $200 million investment for REDD+. And this investment is not coming because the country has goodwill, but because the country has committed through its Ministry of Finance to tackle land use planning and to tackle land tenure as crucial elements for its forest plan. Other examples of countries that are working on REDD+ and that show this catalytic element, we can find them in Latin America. In Peru, for instance, 2 years ago, the government of Peru committed, together with the governments of Norway and the government of Germany, to a bilateral agreement for reducing deforestation and conserving the forest. In this agreement, which is an international commitment of the government of Peru, and I'm going to quote the data just not to get it wrong, the government commits to get to advance and to at least regularize 5 million hectares of indigenous peoples' lands, especially related to demarcation and titling, and at least 2 million hectares in payments for conservation performance in indigenous communities. Last year, precisely around the Paris summit that we all know about, Colombia also committed internationally and signed a bilateral agreement with the UK, Germany, and Norway to add at least 2.5 million hectares of protected areas. And of course, these protected areas is not in the old style. It means working with the communities that are in and around those protected areas. Also, they committed to an important restoration, forest restoration portfolio. And we all know how important it is for many indigenous communities that have suffered forest degradation, the importance of restoration. And also to progress in environmental zoning of indigenous people territories. Therefore, the REDD+ mechanism, if taken at national level with the transformational vision it entails, can be a catalyst for land rights. It's a matter of inscribing in the proper understanding of what are the drivers of deforestation, what is the kind of policy dialogues and policy reforms that the countries need to deal, and then inscribing in a transversal way through the different governmental instances. It's possible and it can yield results. Still, in those countries that I mentioned, the hardest work is still ahead, which is to do the regularization. But the steps are made because countries, through the new international landscape for sustainable development, through the SDGs, and in particular through the Paris Agreement, they are going to commit to do policies and measures for sustainable development, depending on the nature of those countries. Those questions are going to come. What is very important, and here is the sort of conclusion and lessons we take, is that the questions about land rights and indigenous peoples need to be very well inscribed in the policy dialogues, in the INDCs, in the different commitments that countries are going to take. At the same time, when there are international agreements and investment finance or performance-based finance that will come to countries for international environmental goods, also the rights are flagged. Here is a matter of finding the tactical alliances and the adequate dialogues. There is not anymore the opportunity, or we cannot afford anymore to have parallel streams of land. Things need to be connected, and countries, each one with its own history and its own vision, can build these narratives of how they connect forests at the community level with the tenure issues adequately addressed, with the national policy and commitments that country will try to advance with the international commitment. Two last points to mention is, well, first point is that these sort of changes are inevitable. It's a matter of looking, exploiting, and setting the adequate dialogues in the countries to connect these dots. But when countries are going to be serious about the Paris Agreement, they are going to have to connect that. It's inevitable. The opportunities to craft in the conditions in every country. Secondly, we all know, you all know, indigenous peoples are the primary curators of the forest. So therefore, the reforms and the policy commitments of countries need to take into account the primary curators. Nevertheless, has to be a work of alliances, has to be a work of multi-stakeholders engagement. The forest will only be preserved if there is adequate state-level commitments where the different actors join forces in one vision. And a final question that is very important is that land is not only a right, it's also a means. It's the means to achieve these global goals of sustainable development and climate. And therefore, it's very important to connect the rights with the means. It's not only rights because there is an entitlement or an historical justice, it's the rights because through these rights, the stakeholders are going to be able to contribute to local, national, and global goals, which is what everybody wants. And in this sense, here comes a very important question, and I will live with it, is that around land rights, there are many different modalities. We listened before from our leader, there is struggle for community rights. There are questions about individual rights. There is, what is the tenure? What are the rights of lands? Is land to be conserved? Is land to be sold? Is to be traded? Here comes a very important question that I want to leave to the audience, because as soon as this policy process advances, countries and stakeholders will need to think very wisely on how land rights are defined and handled. And it changes very much how it is. If we remember the previous sort of wave of land rights and land titling around the 90s, the underlying philosophy about land rights was to transform individuals and transform land in a commodity that could be sold. And we all know many cases in which there were land titled to communities on an individual basis, that when you look 20, 30 years later, what has happened is that this has led to big land holdings, because due to poverty, due to other pressures, precisely the right became a sort of abuse by stronger capitalist powers. So there is very important question that the stakeholders need to think: what modalities of tenure are needed to ensure that the equality at the grassroots is achieved and the global environmental goods like forest conservation are achieved. This is why the struggle for land rights is a struggle that also will be defined in the details. And this is why it's very important that indigenous peoples, in their own thinking, in their dialogues, in their mobilizations, in their particular work, think very much in the same way as our leader from Brazil mentioned, what is the vision? Where we want to go, where the communities want to go, where the stakeholders want to go, where the nations want to go, because that will determine the criteria, the mechanisms, the operationalizations, the operational details that will sustain the land rights settlement process in every country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we told the story starting from the community level. We talked about the SDG framework, the nationally determined contributions, and RED+. I wanted to go back just a moment to the community level and just to say just a few words about a report, a book that will be published next month. There are just a couple of slides to let you know that the Equator Initiative is publishing a study based on 14 years of work, many winners like Tashka's community recognizing and advancing the climate and sustainable development innovations of indigenous peoples. Drawing from a pool of 208 community winners, we studied case studies showing the approaches that indigenous peoples and forest communities have used to achieve livelihoods in their forests, forest restoration, forest-friendly agriculture, and forest protection. Next slide. The scope of the benefits is enormous. Just the 22 communities we studied alone protect more than 1 million hectares of forests. It's a massive aggregate of carbon storage and climate benefits. It's an unmistakably global phenomenon. It's also significant because these areas are often areas that are so remote, off-road, governments, NGOs have no access to. These are often the most highly threatened areas which are extremely important. No other way to protect them than to rely on the communities to protect them. Next slide. And in our study, there's no factor more central to the success of indigenous and community managed forests than enforceable land rights. That's a conclusion we reached. Land rights are needed to effectively control logging, the examples of Cambodia to talk about, to fend off land grabs. The Filipino example tells that story, and to provide incentives to make long-term investments in forests. And while it is clear that land title is optimal, it's not the only route to secure forest tenure. Other options include co-management of protected areas and indigenous and community conserved areas. And we give a number of examples. So land title is a great option, but there are other ways to make progress. We've seen communities. Next slide. These are just pictures of the Cambodia, Madagascar, and Philippines examples. Next slide. Land rights alone is not enough. This is one element of an enabling environment. Governments can help. They can help build capacities through extension services. They can encourage the formation of cooperatives and associations to link communities and foster knowledge. They can help with forest monitoring and enforcement. NGOs can also help. They can partner to transfer technical skills, help with drafting forest management plans, and so on. And companies, as we heard from Tashka, companies can often sometimes contribute to product development, market research, and donors. We're represented here. The government of Norway is represented here by Ambassador Hans Bratskar, who was the former deputy foreign minister of the country and the founder of the Norwegian International Climate and Forest Initiative, an amazingly strong commitment to these issues. Norway has done amazing work, and that's an example of reliable, well-timed finance can really help make a difference. Next slide. These are pictures of the Brazil, that's Tashka's community we've heard about, Peru, Kenya, and Mexico that are featured in the book. And the last point I'd like to make is to say that action to expand official recognition and legal protection of community forest rights must be made a priority. As we've heard today, there are 100 reasons why this should be. Indigenous and community managed forests are critical, underutilized source of climate solutions, not to mention the SDGs as well. Indigenous peoples and local communities lack legal title to nearly 3/4 of their traditional lands. Some studies by Alan Frechette and his colleagues have made that clear. And this gap in rights represents one of the primary barriers to realization of the targets set out in both the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. And my last point is, and I think this summarizes what we've all been saying, community-based forest management could expand considerably under the right policy conditions and with adequate support. So I'll stop there and thank you very much. This concludes the presentation part of our event here, and I would like to
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite you to pose questions, make comments, and also know that it's 2:30 right now. You have half an hour to get back. It's only a 5-minute walk. But for those of you who need to leave, please feel free to leave. But those who want to stay, will stay as long as you want. We have, I don't know, maybe not longer than tomorrow. Just feel free to make some points, questions. I would like to invite you to, say whatever you'd like. And also, I wanted to say, if you're leaving, that the interpretation unit must be returned. If you don't return those units, we'll all be fired. The desk to return these is outside the door, past the food on the right. But feel free to stay. And who would like to make a comment or ask a question or make a point? Okay, just identify yourself and scream out your point, and go ahead. We'll take 3 or 4, and then we'll ask the panel to respond. Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Quisiera felicitar Rosa Trujillo, Venezuela, Red de Mujeres Indígenas, asesora Red de Mujeres Indígenas. Bueno, quisiera hacerles una pregunta y felicitarlos por la presentación. Para mí ha sido muy claro, muy importante ver que se aterriza sobre un hecho tan importante como la protección de los bosques, emisiones de carbono, cambio climático. Hay pueblos indígenas que tienen entre sus prácticas quemar pequeños espacios de tierra para cultivos pequeños. Y quisiera saber si ustedes tienen alguna experiencia en relación a esto, de cómo se ha establecido el diálogo para poder hacer entender a la comunidad o al pueblo el peligro que puede suponer en ocasiones por la degradación ambiental o por el cambio climático, la desertificación, las prácticas de quema de pequeños espacios dentro de los bosques que normalmente se rotan. Entonces quisiera saber si tienen alguna experiencia.
Thank you.
My name is Rosa Trujillo. I'm from Venezuela. I'm from the Women's Indigenous and I'd like to congratulate all of you for your presentation. It was very clear, and I think that you were discussing a very important topic, the protection of our forests, for carbon emissions, climate change. And as in some of the areas where Indigenous peoples live, they have the practice of the slash and burn rotating,
Shifting cultivation.
shifting cultivation. And I'd like to know if any of you have experience in relation to this and the dialogue that can take place to help communities understand that perhaps this can create a danger for degradation and deforestation and desertification.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we need to take other questions, but is there something very brief? Just okay.
En Venezuela hay una experiencia de entrega de tierra, reconocimiento de los derechos de la Constitución, marco legal, entrega de tierras y a veces créditos, pero sin embargo todavía no es suficiente.
Well, in Venezuela, there is a legal framework, and they've been given their land. Sometimes that's not enough.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yes, next.
My name.
Go ahead.
My name is Carlos Rivas. I'm from Nicaragua. I represent the Council of Elders of the Mosquito. I'm also the great-grandson of the last Mosquito hereditary chief, King Andrew. And what you, honorable representative, said about land rights is exactly what we, the native of Nicaragua, suffer. We have a title to all the territory. Up to this, it's not exactly all, sorry. From the 52% of territory that we have, now, after the land title that we got from the Nicaraguan government, we lose about 19%. Now we only got about 33% of that territory, just in Nicaragua. And with this title, a lot of people, it's been said here, sent from Nicaragua government to say how good Nicaragua is doing in our behalf, on the indigenous behalf. But the real truth is the indigenous people don't really have this right to their land. What we have is just fake paperwork the same as shown in paper. Right now we have a land grabbers that is killing our people. And we talked so many times to the Nicaraguan representative, they don't even want to listen to us. We suffered a great deal. And deforestation. The government says publicly and the representative that there is no deforestation. But the government has signed a treaty or arrangement with a big company called Alba Forestal and other international companies, which they provide help with the military force to go to the native people land and cut these trees and take it out and just take it to the capital and somehow, in some way, send it to where they have to be. But to the Mosquito people and other communities like Sumayagnas and Ramas, if we cut a tree or something, they will confiscate us. Say that is illegal, cut the trees. But that is illegal, cut the trees for us. But the government is still doing it. But they say, no, we don't do that. So I'm really sorry to say like this, but only talk really won't help too much. The international community and also like people like you who worry about the well-being of other people need to get involved and really get to look into what's really going on. Because there is a lot of people that comes here in the UN and says very great thing about what's going on in Nicaragua. But the real story is totally different from what it is. I'm sorry to take so long, but
we need to finish this. We have other questions. Maybe just wrap it up if you would.
So,
we have to hear from other people.
Right now we have an autonomous law, which all the territory supposedly have a representative or a president. All this president is picked somehow by the government, the people of their interests, to control all the territories. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Yes. And if you could just be brief, because we want to hear from a lot of people.
Una pregunta, pues vamos en una pregunta. ¿Cómo es que ustedes, tanto Red como algunas de las instancias, pueden apoyarnos a nosotros? ¿Es necesario que sea a través de organizaciones, a través de gobiernos, o podemos hacerlo a través de organizaciones? ¿Nos interesa?
So my name is Lisa Sandoval. I'm from Michoacan, Mexico, and I just have one question. How is it that you, those of you from RED or other organizations, how can you support us? Could you support us? Is it through organizations, NGOs, or is it through the governments that we can get your support?
Thank you very much. Raise your hand if you'd like to say something and just see the total list. So we'll hear very quickly, just one sentence if you could. Okay.
Soy quechua.
I'm from Peru.
Escuché sobre la tierra, tenencia, desforestación, todo eso, pero para nosotros los indígenas, como soy indígena, es lamentable hablar más de 500 años sobre el tema de la tierra, porque sigue siendo un problema muy fuerte, muy para los indígenas, demasiadamente trágico, porque nosotros solamente podemos defender nuestra tierra a base de luchas. Y eso es lo que se ha hecho en el Perú. Y es por eso que el gobierno peruano ha tenido que decir, bueno, o sea, tengo que hacer algo, porque si no hay luchas, si no hay protestas, si no hay no escucha, es sordo y ciego también, ¿no? Creo que es importante, importantísimo que ustedes, o sea, nos apoyen porque tenemos derechos, pero más obligaciones tenemos. Derechos muy poquito, ¿sí? Obligaciones sí, o sea, obligación de ceder nuestra tierra, obligación de dar que las empresas mineras o la desforestación o las petroleras, a pesar de que tengamos papel, documento, a pesar de que tengamos todo, o sea, no se respeta. Ni el convenio 169, y ahora se va recortando acá en la ONU mismo la participación indígena, porque los verdaderos indígenas no estamos, o sea, ni siquiera nos dejan hablar, acá todavía me están dejando hablar. Entonces creo que es importantísimo, o sea, trabajar unidos y hacer de que, porque no es solo para los indígenas, es para todos, porque la contaminación ambiental, eso nos va a matar a toda la humanidad, y creo que la defensa es importantísima. Solo eso les quería decir.
Okay, so for 500 years, we've been talking about all these issues like land tenure, deforestation, and as we've been talking about this, but we need to take action because this is a huge tragedy. We need to defend our lands. We need to defend our rights. And the way we do this is by struggles. And the reason that the Peruvian government listened to us was because we went out, we were demonstrating, we were showing that we were fighting, that we were in this struggle. Because many times the governments are blind and deaf and they don't want to listen to us. But they will listen to us if we get out there, get out in the streets, demonstrate. So we have many obligations, we have very few rights. And when the mining companies come to us, the forest logging companies, even though we have a title, they don't respect us. And even if, according to Convention 169, this isn't being respected, they're even cutting back our participation as Indigenous peoples here at the UN. We can't even speak here. But thank you for letting me speak here. And I think if we all work together, then it's for the benefit of all of us. It's not for Indigenous peoples, because when contamination and pollution kills, it's not going to just kill Indigenous peoples, but it'll kill all of us. So we need to work together and fight together.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Last, you just must say something. You just couldn't finish the day without saying something. You just have to. Okay, one here and one there, and then you have to. You won't be able to sleep tonight if you don't say something. Okay, just a sentence. Okay.
Thank you, Charles. My name is Daniel Lesaki from Kenya. Very briefly, Joseph, of course, all the other presenters, of course, very thanks for the presentations. But I'd like to really emphasize what Joseph said about the need to have national discussions, national, the focal things have to be at the national level. I understand that a lot of governments will run away from us, but they will come back. They will come back one day. We have very good examples of governments that have totally been against Indigenous people's issues and Indigenous people's rights, but they will come back to us. So don't despair. As Indigenous people, let us not despair. Governments are coming back to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very good. Yes?
Now, my name is Colton. I'm with the Working Group on Food and Hunger.
Real loud, scream.
I'm with the Working Group on Food and Hunger. My name is Colton. I just wanted to ask the panel, forests right now are not really in the dialogue of food and hunger work. And I've heard from you a few things about why that's specifically a problem for Indigenous communities. I would like to ask the advice of the panel in what ways we can start to engage forests in food and hunger dialogues. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And the last point right here.
Okay. My name is Chan Conwer. I am from Myanmar. My nationality is Mon. Mon people, they lost their country over 250 years. They don't have any country. They don't have any land right now. What I want to say is how you guys can help is our ethnic group in Myanmar. Right now, Myanmar is a little bit better, but change government, but military is not much different. They are the same. They're killing people. They have civil war. We want to have that kind of problem, and we want to have children in the jungle. They die every day. They get killed every day. I want you guys.
Great. Thank you very much. So we've heard from people from Venezuela, from Nicaragua, from Peru, from Mexico, from Kenya, from Myanmar. A series of questions. I won't repeat the questions, but why don't I just invite the panel to respond to whichever points you wanted to respond to, and maybe we could start with Galina, and then We'll go to Tashka.
I wanted to respond to the question regarding the shifting cultivation.
Real loud so they can hear you way in the back.
I wanted to respond to the question about the shifting cultivation, and it's a very misunderstood practice that has existed for millennia, and indigenous peoples around the world have been using shifting cultivation to produce their food. I want to refer to an article in National Geographics. If you just do Google search, shifting cultivation, National Geographics, it's an amazing article that provides basically every bit of information why shifting cultivation is not what people think it is, and that we should actually protect that form of producing food. Like recently, shifting cultivation has been blamed as adding carbon in the air, but this is not true. Actually, I just wanted to read from that article. A multi-year study of northern Thailand on shifting cultivation showed that it absorbs significantly more carbon that it releases every year. Burning trees do not do add carbon to the atmosphere, of course, but in a given year, only around 10% of the land around the area. The rest lies fallow for 6 to 10 years, soaking up carbon and growing trees. So just a few sentences and you might understand what the article is about. But again, go and read that article and you will get the full answer.
Thank you, Galina.
Yeah.
Tashka.
Yeah, I didn't understand what you say about the forest, food, and hunger, something like that.
Yeah, I was trying to communicate that in the food and hunger dialogues, mostly land is talked about as agricultural land, and those are the important lands in terms of feeding people. But no one really talks about forests as the land important to feed people. So how can we change that?
Well, what I can share with you is my local experience. As I told, we have about 200,000 hectares of land. To us, it was very easy just to log in. But we find out other kind of activities, economic activity, where we can have income for the community. Because we have so many knowledge in the forest. But the problem, all this kind of knowledge is stolen by and come back for us like a box. I can give you a lot of example, but like we have a lot of like in my community, we have so many kind of traditional medicine. It's proven by for us the Yawanawa have the best medicine for a snake. When a snake bites somebody, any Yawanawa die in the forest because we have the strong medicine. Like for women have a problem to have a babies, they have the strong medicine. All the Yawanawa have babies. Also, when the woman they don't have babies, they have a medicine also they have to stop to have the babies. And we have a kind of oil. We have a kind. We need to explore it like that. Like we are working right now about we call ethnotourism and the community. What the deal what we did with people. We have a lot of knowledge in the communities, and we have a lot of resources in the city. Why we not have this kind of exchange? People come to visit Yawanawa. They pay $1,500. I receive like 4 groups for the year. I receive like about 15, 20 people in this group. People come to, they spend a time looking how the Yawanawa fishing, hunting, how we farming, and that's money help people. We don't need to destroy our forest. With this money, people can buy what we cannot produce in the community. Like a lot of people talk about global warming, or climate change. But people are in the comfort zone. Nobody wants to get out of condition. Nobody wants to walk. They prefer being in the car. Like for the Yawanawa, we do from the Yawanawa community as we get the highway, we spend about 3 days without the motors. With the motors, we spend now about 5 hours. I don't want to back spend 3 days. Yeah, but I need to find the resources where I can have the motors, but the way I cannot cause damage to my environment, and also I can enjoy the forest as well.
Thank you, Tashka. Alain, any final comment, response to any of the questions we've heard here, or comments?
Yeah, I'd like to briefly address maybe 3 of the points that were raised. There was a question around IPs do not have the rights to land. There was a gentleman from Nicaragua who explained that, Nicaragua, who go through all sorts of struggles to try to defend and protect their rights. To address this, in our view, we need to have strong international signals, strong backing from the international institutions that recognize and monitor and hold countries accountable for recognition of land rights. And this should be tied, in our opinion, to the financial agreements that get signed for international assistance. And there are also private sector initiatives, such as the Interlocking Group, which I invite you to look at. So you can just Google interlockinggroup.org, which is a group of private sector multinational corporations that have signed on to tools, systems, and strategies for reducing infringements on land tenure rights. How can we support or gain support? There's a question that was asked, how do we work? We at RI work through a global coalition of organizations. So we have 13 partners and over 150 different collaborators that we work with. Actually, it's more closer to 300 now. I invite you to look at our website, rightsandresources.org. It has all the list of organizations, which are mostly civil society organizations, NGOs, and groups dedicated to the recognition of land rights across the world. And there's certainly one of those that's in your neighborhood that you can contact. And then finally, there was something about needing to work together and fight together. Well, I join you to join the global call to action. This is our struggle, and this is only together will we achieve recognition of land rights for all.
Thank you very much. Last word with Dr. Garí.
Thank you very much. I'll try to provide some 3 points that kind of try to respond to the questions or the comments or connect to them. The first one and the major one is that the point of this event today was basically to signal that there is a paradigm shift in global development. And this paradigm shift was crafted last year, 2015, because we have the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the Global Development Framework, and the Paris Agreement, which connects it with the climate agenda. Many of the things of this new paradigm are not new. You are working, many of you, on that since 20 years ago. The change is that now this is global policy. The existing global development policy, the predominant one up to now, was based on economic growth, on increasing trade, and overall on exploiting nature and people's rights. We have a new paradigm, which doesn't mean things are changing in 5 minutes. We are going to have the next 20, 30 years a clash between the old paradigm and the new paradigm, because both are going to kind of be in the face of governments. But the change is ongoing. And I would like to appreciate the comment of our colleague mentioning don't despair. History tells you despair, because the past is terrible, it's terrific. But there are changes in the global policy framework, and we need to exploit them. That was the main message. There is a lot of abuse, there is a lot of problems, but we need to start connecting the dots. And the new development paradigm at global level is precisely a paradigm that is going to be based
on climate mitigation, it's going to be on forest conservation, it's going to be based on equality, on inclusion, on rights. We need to exploit these new elements of the new paradigm. And here comes the question that the key element is to get in the middle of the policy dialogues that countries will need to face. They're going to be very controversial. We're going to have very different forces confronting each other, the old style and the new style, but both will have to resolve. And it's very important that we are in those dialogues all together, bringing intelligence, bringing best practice, bringing all claims and new visions. And here goes to the question of the lady of Michoacan, whether the UN, we have programs to support communities. Yes, we have a few programs. I would like to mention the small grant programs or community-based Red Plus. But the challenge ahead is not to have this small project of the activity at the community level, especially for the UN, is to force governments to align to the new paradigm. The fight is not going to be done locally only. The fight will happen when governments change their policies, their regulations, their staff, their visions. This is why it's important to work through governments, because the real long-term scale changes will happen when governments change regulation, investments, priorities. And this is why for the UN, for all these topics we discuss, the priority is to work with governments, because this is the key element for change. Second point, and I'll be very short, on Myanmar. Myanmar, there is a tremendous opportunity in the same line. Myanmar is opening up. It's in a great transition. And the ethnic minorities, they are mostly in the external belt of the country, where most of the forest is, where most of the abuses have happened, where most of the exclusion happened. It's a moment to connect decentralization with forest conservation, with rights. There is the opportunity of the transition. It's going to be painful, it's going to be difficult, there will be 2 steps ahead, 3 steps back sometimes, but overall the question hopefully will be positive. Making these connections precisely on the transition is the great opportunity that Myanmar has, especially the ethnic minorities. Third point on forest and hunger. Yeah, the key question is to bring the analysis and the information to trigger this debate. But I want to mention something. The forests are very important for hunger and for food production, not in the forest, miles of kilometers ahead. The high agricultural production in Chile and in Argentina is because of the Amazon rainforest. The high food production in Mozambique, in Zambia, in Zimbabwe in the old times, in South Africa, those are potential tremendous agricultural powers are because of the Congo Basin forest. Because the cycles of water have an impact miles ahead. This is why one sees big bread baskets sometimes 1,000, 2,000 kilometers away from forest, because this is where the water cycles go. So it's very interesting to bring the idea, but let's not forget that somehow many countries have tremendous agricultural production thanks to the forests of other countries. And here there is a tremendous opportunity to connect discussions. Final comment, I think it was responded on the question of shifting cultivation. Certainly shifting cultivation in the indigenous agroecological system, it has no impact whatsoever. On the contrary, the secondary growth often has more biodiversity than primary forests. The problem that happens is when shifting cultivation is not based on the indigenous agroecological system, typically with low population densities, but when it starts to be a front of transforming the landscapes. In that case, there is a problem of long-term sustainability of forest conservation. And this is why it's important that when there are territorial demarcations and territorial rights, there is associated a management plan of communities and indigenous peoples. We have that land, how we manage that, how we monitor the management, and how we have mechanisms for participatorily correct the things that go wrong and ensure that the indigenous agroecology keeps performing its cycle.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'd like to offer sincere thanks to Tashka, Galina, Ala, and Joseph, and thanks to all of you. Let's give ourselves a hand. And my last comment is that UNDP, on behalf of UNDP, I can say that after decades and decades of work in development and environment, that we've seen enough to know that indigenous peoples and land rights are crucial to all the achievement of the development and climate goals that are ahead of us. So thank you for joining us today, and feel free to mingle informally for a few minutes if you'd like. Thank you very much.
next time we have a bigger room.
Hey, my brother.